Hi everyone, welcome. Welcome to Pathways, February. We're happy and excited to host this session today. We've been really keeping our finger on the pulse and thinking, well, what topic is going to make the most sense right now? And we start with Gary, who's going to introduce us to, or help us take the pulse again with stillness, and talk us through stillness practices, exercises. And then I'm going to hand over to Ashley King, who's going to help us to reconnect with communication, the whole topic of communication and person-centered communication. I'm going to hand over rather than talk through the topic. Gary, could I hand over to you and get the ball rolling?
Thanks, Rahzeb, and welcome everyone. In this series, I invite you to expand the story you're living and to discover that stillness really works. In each session, I begin by speaking about what stillness is and why it's so vital to our lives. Then I'll invite you to join me in a stillness practice. So let's begin by exploring what we can say about stillness. First, I'd like to remind us that in previous sessions, as I've done in previous sessions, I shared how our overemphasis on doing, controlling, fixing, managing problems, even with the right intentions to do the right thing as caring people, professionally and personally, is leading us to experience burnout, mental, physical, and spiritual. We all need stillness to bring balance to our lives. We could call it a marriage. We still need doing, but we could call it a marriage of doing and being, with being leading the way. Usually, if we have any stillness, it's somewhere hidden in the background. Today, I'd like to say a few words about the connection between stillness and positive thinking before we do the stillness practice. Whether this positive thinking is applied to workplace, care partnering, or daily life with COVID. And you can read more about this in chapter 5 of my book, Pathways to Stillness. We grow, we learn, we find meaning and our own wisdom and stillness through stillness practice and through our own life story. However, the restoring journey, changing our story, doesn't simply involve choosing a better story to replace the old one, sort of at will. New meaning and the process of restoring does not either come from trying to force yourself to think positively about a troublesome situation. In fact, I agree with the statement some writers call positive thinking can become a prison. Your life's made up of thoughts, emotions, and actions, or behavior, how we think, feel, and act. It may be possible to change your thoughts about something, and there are techniques to try to do this. Yes, positive thinking is one of these techniques. However, the effort for some of us, people who have told me, the effort it takes to maintain this attitude may become exhausting, such as with challenges like chronic pain or dementia or an addiction. The problem is that we're still in the doing mode, attempting to control or fix the problem as our thinking mind scrambles around to find a positive solution. In addition, it's a prison in the sense that you're either a winner or a loser, depending on how successful you are in keeping up the program. What I mean by this is that you don't feel well in the first place, and then you may beat yourself up because you can't manage to maintain thinking positively about your suffering. Perhaps you can't make yourself feel positive about going to work during these times, especially as these challenges don't seem to go away very quickly. You may feel there's no way out. In contrast to this, a stillness approach, such as restoring, suggests that you first get out of your thinking mind, step back, try to see a larger picture by first trying some relax into stillness movements that we're going to do in a few moments. In this way, instead of fighting or denying the particular change that has occurred in your life, you make room in your present story for the change that has occurred or that you would want to occur. It's about finding new meaning in your whole story not just attempting to fix the broken part. In this approach, you don't split yourself between what you accept as you and the you that you do not want to accept. It's all you, or all part of your story, the stillness and the area of suffering. One of my Dutch colleagues says, who works with people with depression, his clients often say, I am a depressed person. He tries to help them change their story. I am a person who is experiencing depression. By following this approach, there's less danger for the pain or stress part of your story to take you over and run the show, because the pain story gets placed into the bigger story. There's a lot of mindfulness literature that works from the same point of view as this. In this approach to unwanted change, you cease doing and trying to get somewhere through effort and willpower. Rather, you begin to be, to let go and accept. You're not accepting into nothing, but into stillness, which is a comforting presence. As in previous sessions, I'd like to give an example of humor as a very effective pathway to stillness. You may notice that a good joke, or even a lame joke, stops your monkey mind and brings you to the present moment where stillness resides. We laugh before we think. Speaking of jokes, here's one. I accidentally rubbed ketchup in my eyes. I now have Heinz sight. Or I'm reading a book titled Quick Money for Dummies by Robin Banks. Now I would like to invite you to join me in a stillness practice based on Tai Chi. Stillness practice, by helping you to relax, enhances narrative care by enabling you to be more present to this particular person now. We need to keep these movements simple. Speaking for myself, I'm more likely to practice it if it's simple. It's important to have no expectations from this practice, as that is just more doing. Stillness comes and goes. Also, you do not need to get it right. There's nothing to achieve. Just be with it and relax. If you don't have any time, try to steal 2 minutes or 5 minutes for yourself. It's best to practice for a short time more often, but do whatever works for you. You may want to try one or a number of these movements, whatever works for you, without creating more stillness in your life. However, the Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago, recommends that if you really have no time, you should practice twice. This is because you may think that you're doing nothing and wasting your time. But paradoxically, you relax and you find you can do more with less energy and more focus. In the following sessions and the previous sessions, I repeat these movements and provide you with additional guidelines. If you follow the series, you'll deepen your understanding of the practice. A lot of the deepening comes from simply showing up and doing them, trying your best to do them. But if you're doing this for the first time, you won't lose out on anything. Also, you may practice these movements from either a standing or a seated position. I'm just going to move my chair now, and I invite you to join me. The first movement I invite you to try is called Wu Qi, or standing meditation. So I invite you to put one hand on your belly, with your palm there, and the other hand on top. And then from here, try to draw your breath in from under your belly, or even your pelvis, if you can breathe deeply, but don't force yourself, because we don't want anybody to pull any muscles. So just draw your breath in from underneath. Nice deep breath, and then let your breath out and let your tummy expand. Breathing in from under the belly, and breathing out, let your breath out, let your tummy expand. Again, just breathing in and breathing out. Once you've got the idea with this, you can actually close your eyes if you want to. Breathing in and breathing out. A couple more. Try to draw the breath in from under your belly, under your navel, sorry. And one more. Okay, I was thinking this morning that you could actually do this exercise maybe with one hand in a lineup in a grocery store, and nobody would probably know what you're doing, relaxing, getting to yourself to relax into stillness. The second movement I'd like to show you is called the wave. So you turn your palms out. Just gonna move this a little bit here. Turn your palms out. Try to relax your shoulders, relax your elbows. Put your tongue lightly at the roof of your mouth. There are a few guidelines here. And then from here, also soften your knees a little bit and drop your hips. We do that because you don't want to hurt your back or your knees. So if you soften your knees, drop your hip, you should feel the pressure on your thigh muscles, not on your back or your knees. Okay, from here, take a nice breath, palms up, about shoulder height, turn over, and float back down as you breathe out. Palms out, breath in, as deep a breath as you can do comfortably, turn the palms over, float back down. If you're trying to move your arms slowly and you run out of breath, just take another one. Nice deep breath, turn the palms over, float back down. Again, soften your shoulders, try not to raise your shoulders. Back down. And we'll do a couple more, nice deep breath. Turn over and float back down. In. And you might want to stretch your palms a bit and press them into the air as you go down. And we'll do more as we think about that idea. Palms up, turn over, float back down, just pressing into the air a little bit. Good. So the way this works is the way Tai Chi works and mindfulness, stillness practice is that you're breathing and gently trying to coordinate your breath with a movement. And both those things help to bring you to the present moment. And in the present moment, there is stillness. There's no anxiety. You may notice this. There's no anxiety, no depression, no thinking of the past and the future, just this wonderful present moment. At first, this may take a little practice, but as you repeat the movements, it will become more and more easy to do this. Let's try a couple of times, one more movement called wave your hands like a cloud. Breathing in, turn over, float back down. This time, as you come down, before you lock your elbows, fold your palms, turn them up, and come up just in front of your own body here, not too far out this way, just in here. Turn back over, float back down. We do it 3 times. Cross, palms up. Picture your arms floating up or floating like a cloud. And down. Nice and slow and soft. Okay, one more. This is the 4th one, so we take a nice breath. And just come down to your side. Let's try that one more time. Breathing in, come up. Float back down. Cross your palms, open them up, float up. Float up and turn your palms outwards this way a bit. It'll give you a little bit of tension in the move. Lower it up. Just light like air. Last one, take a nice breath. And float down. Great. Thank you very much for joining me. And back to you, Rahzeb.
Thanks so much, Gary. I can see that you're coming out of winter hibernation. It's very nice to see you loosening up even more. It's very nice. Thank you. Yeah, it's great. So, talking of hibernation, we're all coming out of hibernation and heading towards spring, moving away from, hopefully, from COVID pandemic to COVID endemic, something we just have to manage to live with, without panic, with calm, with stillness. And we're going to open up, and I think there's a challenge for us to start connecting with our communities again. There are some challenges that have been revealed by the recent experiences or the experience of the last year or two. That's going to need good communication for us to get to grips with things. So perfectly timed, Ashley King is going to guide us through and connect us with person-centered values and communication, bring those two things together.
Thanks for
Over to you,
that.
Ashley.
Thanks. And now that we are in a place of stillness and really able to kind of view things a little bit more clearly, I hope, I know that these stillness exercises really help me and ground me in being able to look at things a little more clearly and a little bit more methodically. So when we were talking about presentation topics, Daphne and I are both operators within long-term care organizations, and we were kind of rolling around ideas on what we could discuss. And one of the pieces of, one of the topics that really came to the top of our minds, as are probably on your minds, whether you're working directly in long-term care with residents and with clients, or if you're working in a position of leadership, is the topic of communication. And so we are adapting based on the fact that we have created some presentations, and we provide guidance on person-centered dementia care communication. And realistically, often what we teach is that inclusive dementia communication is good for everyone. It's really important for everyone. And because it embodies and applies that person-centered lens to communication. So we only have about 10 minutes. So of course we can't really fully dive into the topic of communication, but again, just like Gary has done with stillness and permitting us that time to reflect and renew, I just wanted to bring the topic of communication to the forefront because as Rahzeb shared, we are finally in a place, hopefully many of us, that we're starting to be able to kind of take our gaze up and away from the day-to-day hamster wheel, if you will, of operating within long-term care. And again, regardless of your position, that is where we are, and that's where our focus has been over the past 2 years. So or almost 2 years. So what are some easy, adaptable approaches to communication that are inclusive, that are person-centered, and that can engage us and reaffirm our values of person-centered care? So communication is defined as a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system, of symbols, signs, or behavior. And so when we think of it like that, there are a number of people within our sphere of influence, again, whether we're working directly in long-term care or whether we are in leadership in long-term care, who it's incredibly important for us to communicate to. And when we think of communication as an opportunity for learning, and learning and understanding someone's needs and wants, right? And communication of those needs and wants. Who is it that it's important for us to communicate to? So first and foremost, our residents, right, are at the center of that need for us to communicate. Our family members and our care partners are incredibly important and incredibly valuable to creating that person-centered culture and that person-centered dementia care culture within our organizations. Staff to staff and management to staff communications are incredibly important. And then two other aspects of communication that channels of communication that are incredibly important are to our stakeholders and community resources. Often we refer to them within our organization as those cheerleaders, the people who don't work within our organization, but who truly value the mission and vision of your organization. And your volunteer and service providers. So there are 5 different groups that you can work on and develop those person-centered communication practices with. So when we think about communication, and again, bringing that dementia inclusive lens, it's really foundationally about opening our perspective to how others may interpret the things we're saying and how. It helps us to focus more on how we are communicating as opposed to just what we are saying and what we are trying to communicate. And it allows us to adjust our perspective of the conversation to understand how others may communicate or how others may consume that information. And lastly, when we think of dementia inclusive communication, it builds empathy for us. It allows us to understand the perspective of that person who's receiving the communication. So those are just a few tips and tricks. Those are some ways to approach communication. We often say within our organization that communication is absolutely a learned behavior. Nobody starts talking and is an expert at communication by any stretch of the word. And it really takes time to flex that muscle and build strong communication practices, let alone those strong person-centered communication practices. But they're so key in building those inclusive and engaged and person-centered communities. And if you think about the 5 groups of individuals who we communicate with, dementia inclusive communication practices can easily be adopted for each of those groups when you're communicating, and can easily provide that person-centered lens to each of those 5 groups. So just a few key tips that we often teach and that we often communicate within our education sessions and when we're doing some consulting work is a few key tips for inclusive communication. So it's really important for you to open your perspective in how others may interpret the things we're saying and how they're taking that information. What is the other, there's always, they say there's 2 stories and in the middle there's the truth. So we may think that we have a really clear communication to someone, but what might they be seeing from their perspective? Again, working on empathy building. Another tip for inclusive communication is helping us to focus more on how we are communicating versus how we want to communicate. So what is our body language saying? How is our facial expressions? How's our hands? I love to use my hands when I'm communicating. How are those methods and modes of communication changing the message or adapting or driving home that message? Another tip for inclusive communication is allowing us to adjust our perspective of the conversation to understand how others may consume or communicate, right? So really looking at each individual or each group and adapting your communication style to meet the needs of that individual. So for some people, that really strong, direct approach can be appropriate. But for others, that may not work as effectively, and it's not as supportive to them. They won't hear your message as clearly. And when we focus on how others may understand or consume, that can really help us to build empathy and understanding for the people that we're communicating with. And how can we be creative in our communication styles? So again, I don't think any of us will ever be able to say that we are expert communicators, as much as I'm sure we'd all like to. We can always be learning, we can always be adapting, and we can always be learning and understanding new tools for how we can communicate. And using that lens of empathy and understanding to get a little creative with how you communicate is key, especially within large organizations and in leadership. So how can we listen and understand and really provide engagement within our communication? So it's important for us to use active listening skills. So take time to truly listen to what someone's saying, ask questions that are pertinent and relevant to the topic to understand, get a thorough understanding of the topic of conversation. And for residents, support them in discussion. So ask them questions, easy, adaptable questions. Be mindful, as I said, of our nonverbal cues, because our body may say what our words are not saying. I know I do that sometimes. I do that a lot. And so look for nonverbal cues, or be mindful of your nonverbal cues to tell the whole story. And work on cultivating positive relationships by taking the time to get to know and have mutual respect for the resident, the family, the staff member, the stakeholder, or the volunteer that you're talking to or speaking with is key in developing that positive relationship. And lastly, build empathy and understanding. So try to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're communicating with to understand their perspective and where they may be coming from in the conversation. So again, this is a very broad topic crunched into a very short period of time, but we thought that it was really important as we start to reframe and reset, and like I said from the beginning, start to bring our gaze up to refocus and reground ourselves in thorough and effective person-centered communication practices. And again, many of these practices are adopted through our dementia inclusive communication. But as I said at the beginning, we believe that it's really important for everyone to adopt these principles and understand and recognize just how important communication is for everyone involved, especially after what we've been through over the past couple of years. So thank you. We don't have a lot of time. I didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but.
Actually, that was really, really great. Fantastic how you got through that. That's such a big topic. And I even started taking notes to make sure that I didn't miss things. It's great. And I mean, some things really, really hit home, because especially this thing of when everybody's been under pressure for such a long time, there can be such a gap that you create between the aspiration of how you would like to think you're communicating and the reality of what you're actually doing, Mm-hmm. And now is absolutely a time to reflect and connect with how you could actually work on that. I'm thinking back to an exercise we did with Daphne back in November and December, when she said, these 4 questions of what do I want to keep doing? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to stop doing? What do I want to start doing? And these themes that you picked up on communication, I've certainly had to go into that kind of, that practice that we're trying to build for ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And exactly, I think it's just so important for us to be, to your point, Rahzeb, bringing it back to the basics and thinking about it. We've done good, bad, and otherwise over the past 2 years. So how now's the perfect time to be at that critical point that we can be moving forward.
Yeah, we help ourselves in so many ways, absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gary. That was really lovely. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
So yeah. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We'll see you in 1 month, actually, on the 31st of March, same time. Okay, look forward to hosting you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.